Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Disappearances video. All right, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book Vanished, Mysterious Disappearances by David Clark. This time starting a new chapter, chapter 2. And in this case, the theme will be associated with Disappearing Diplomats. That's the official title linked to the chapter. So in other words, it's going to feature famous disappearances of some politicians or other well-to-do type people, those that are involved as notable members of society. I've kind of covered that within some of my past videos, not too many. So this will be a good opportunity to see a bunch of new ones. And who knows, maybe I might feature some of these on an individual set of videos afterward. The very first segment has to do with the disappearance of Benjamin Bathurst. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here, and then I'd love to hear what your own thoughts and comments are on it too. So here's essentially part 1. The disappearance of Benjamin Bathurst at Perlerberg near Berlin in 1809 must surely rank as one of the strangest on record. The more so as, for reasons which will become apparent, it was thoroughly investigated and well documented at the time. Bathurst was, as they say, well born, being the third son of a bishop. The eldest brother became Archdeacon of Norwich, and the second oldest was aide to Wellington during the Peninsular Campaign of 1808 to 1814. Benjamin became a diplomat. His domestic circumstances were less than fortunate, his only son being thrown by a horse and killed, and a daughter drowning in the Tiber. He himself was to be lost without trace in the murky waters of international espionage. Early in 1809, he was sent to Vienna by his kinsman Earl Bathurst, Secretary of State for the Foreign Office. His mission was a secret one to the court of Emperor Francis at a time of critical importance in the Napoleonic Wars. At the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, Napoleon had smashed the Russian and Austrian armies, and Austria had since been a neutral observer of European hostilities. Unofficially, she had been building up a new army of 300,000 men, a maneuver which Britain was happy to encourage. Bathurst did his best to persuade the Austrians that his political masters were about to initiate a major new offensive against the French emperor, and that Austrian support would be an essential ingredient of the plan. The Austrians complied and mobilized. As a result of his successful persuasion, Bathurst came to believe that Napoleon bore him a considerable degree of malice and was, moreover, intent on personal revenge. Certainly his position at the Austrian court became a little fragile after the Austrians' sound drubbing at Wagram on July 6, 1809, and in the autumn of that year, he set out on his journey home. His fears for his own safety can be well understood, for he was compelled to travel through a Europe dominated in its entirety by the enemies of Britain. There was some initial difficulty, therefore, in deciding a safe route. He rejected the seaborne route via Trieste and Malta, an odd decision since after Trafalgar 4 years previously, Britain had control of the high seas. Instead, he decided on the overland passage through North Germany via Berlin. Accompanying him was his private secretary. Traveling as a merchant under the assumed name of Koch, he arrived at Perlerberg, midway between Berlin and Hamburg, at about noon on November 25th. His carriage drew to a halt at the post house, and while his horses were being changed, he ordered some refreshment at the White Swan Inn nearby. Upon finishing his meal, he made a point of visiting the local garrison and sought an interview with the commander, Captain Klitzing, informing him that he feared for his life and requesting protection at the inn. 2 soldiers remained with him there until 7 o'clock, when he dismissed them and ordered the horses to be made ready by 9. Traveling by night, he thought, would be safer than traveling by day. He stood outside the inn, watching his luggage being replaced in the carriage, stepped around to the heads of the horses, and then was never seen again. Inexplicably, without a word, a cry, an alarm of any sort, he was gone, spirited away. All the while, attendants with lanterns had been busy adjusting the harness of the horses while the landlord talked to Bathurst's secretary in the doorway of the inn. And yet, in the very midst of all this activity and surrounded by people, Bathurst had simply disappeared. There was a delay before a search was mounted because it occurred to no one that a man could just vanish under such circumstances. After searching the inn and the immediate surroundings, the secretary approached Captain Klitzing, who authorized a thorough search for the missing man the following day. Rivers were dragged, the countryside was combed, and buildings were scoured, but all in vain. It was not until December 16th that a clue was forthcoming. Two peasant women found a pair of trousers in a local wood. The trousers were soaked with water and contained two bullet holes. One of the pockets revealed a note in Bathurst's handwriting to the effect that he feared danger from the Count d'Intrigueux, a French double agent. Despite offers of generous rewards, no further clues came to light. Of course, the usual rumors circulated. He had been lost at sea, he had been murdered by his secretary, and so on. The Intrigueux apparently claimed that French agents had kidnapped Bathurst and taken him to the French garrison at Perlerberg, where he was murdered. Certainly for propaganda purposes, this was the view that the British government wished to foster. To compound the mystery, an article appeared in January 1810 in a Hamburg newspaper announcing that Bathurst was alive and well, his friends having received a letter from him. The French newspaper Moniteur maintained that he had committed suicide. The British diplomatic service, it claimed, became composed of half-crazy fools. Bathurst had clearly taken on the guise of a political football, both British and French being anxious to use the circumstance of his disappearance to good account against each other. It is often overlooked in assessments of Bathurst's case that he was a very natty dresser. During the course of his last earthly journey, he wore a sable greatcoat lined in violet velvet with a fur cap to match. He also sported a valuable diamond scarf pin. At the time of his disappearance, he had not been wearing the fur coat, yet Captain Klitzing could not find it among his belongings. Eventually, it turned up, hidden in the cellar of a house belonging to a family called Schmidt. Frau Schmidt claimed it had been left at the post house where she had found it. Subsequently, she gave it to her son Augustus, an habitual criminal. This lead is worth following up because someone claimed that Bathurst had actually been seen going off down the street where the Schmidts lived. Unfortunately, internal bureaucratic bickering over the handling of investigations led to this promising avenue being neglected. Had Bathurst simply been the victim of opportunist street crime, the Schmidts were merely charged with the theft of the coat. In April 1810, Bathurst's mother arrived on the scene. Her presence served only to encourage certain dubious individuals with nothing to offer save itchy palms for the reward money. One interesting approach, however, was made by a woman called Hacker, who claimed to have met a man from Perlerberg who told her that he had been paid a considerable sum of money to keep his mouth shut over something he knew concerning, as he put it, the Englishman's murder. Hacker and her husband had been close associates of Augustus Schmidt. But once again, this tantalizing connection was ignored. What Mrs. Bathurst did was get the personal assurance of Napoleon Bonaparte that he knew nothing of the matter. It is probable that he was speaking the truth, having far weightier matters than the elimination of a junior diplomat on his mind. Even if the French were responsible, the deed could well have been engineered by the French Secret Service without Napoleon's knowledge. And so the matter rested until 1952, when a skeleton was discovered during the demolition of a house in Perlerberg. Investigations show that the house, at the time of Bathurst's disappearance, belonged to a man called Mertens, who was employed at the White Swan Inn, where Bathurst had stayed. Naturally, the skeleton could not be identified as Bathurst, and as far as anyone could remember, Mertens had been of good character, although he was known to have been far wealthier than the nature of his employment at the White Swan should have allowed. Had Mertens, perhaps with the aid of Schmidt and the hackers, robbed and murdered the Englishman? The skeleton's condition was suggestive of a violent death. There is no proof that the skeleton was that of Bathurst, and in a small, early 19th century community, it is likely that the lives of the inhabitants were closely intertwined. We cannot make too much of the probability that many of the minor characters in the drama enacted at Perlerberg knew one another. The case must remain a mystery. Bathurst's mother never gave up hope of his return, living out the remainder of her days in an agony of doubt as to whether her son was alive or dead. As a contemporary German commentator remarked, it was as if the ground had opened and swallowed Bathurst up, closing itself upon him without leaving the least trace behind. And with that, let's go ahead and let's conclude part 1 of chapter 2, Disappearing Diplomats, from the book Vanished, Mysterious Disappearances by David Clark. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. For starters, this is a good one. This first segment, right off the bat, it's like a home run. Here you have one of my favorite situations to talk about because it is so tantalizing. I've mentioned that within some of the past videos, where it's that idea that somebody is right there, you see them go across in the corner, and then you turn and they're gone. Like they're literally gone from the face of the earth. I mentioned that in some of the past videos. There was one involving a boy who apparently was playing peekaboo with a friend. He went peekaboo and then he went down into a bush and then was never seen again. There was another one that I did involving an elderly lady who was with some other older ladies. They saw her move towards an area involving some trees that were ahead of them. She went behind those trees. They in turn went behind those trees a few moments later, and they never saw her again. Such was the case here with Benjamin Bathurst. There he was at that inn. He was going out at night to be safe. The people that were there from the inn, the soldiers, and then the secretary, and then I believe it was the captain as well, Captain Klitzing, they were all there right at the inn as well. And he in turn just happened to go right in front of the horses, just away from their view, and then he was gone from the face of the earth as if he was just swallowed, like at the end of the part 1 basically states. What happened to him, right? Very tantalizing. Did somebody grab him? Did he run away? Did anything occur in terms of another dimension opening up? Who knows? But some of those would have easily caused a set of noises unless somebody was very, very stealthy. The thought did cross my mind that maybe there's a chance there was somebody there that was basically in the shadows, that was hired to take care of Bathurst for what he had done earlier. And then right when the moment presented itself, he almost grabbed him, made sure that he was incapacitated immediately, like within a microsecond. And then, of course, putting, let's say, a hand across the mouth, making sure there's no sound, something like that. It would have had to have been picture perfect for them to do so. The other thought that crossed my mind is this. Bathurst may, and the part actually highlighted it very briefly, Bathurst may have disappeared voluntarily. Right when he knew that nobody was looking, he, as a witness later stated, they saw him basically going up the street to an area with another, or towards the area of another house. So he could have left. He knew his dangers. He knew that people were after him. So maybe he in turn decided to just say, screw this, and decided to just leave and leave another normal life elsewhere. Of course, playing his mother and everyone else, thinking that what happened to him. If that's the case, that's another possibility that crossed my mind. What do you guys think? Especially when it came to that skeleton that was found later on. Also linked to that White Swan Inn, the idea that the skeleton could be him. There was no trace, like in terms of DNA or something else, to match that it was him, but it could be him. And so maybe that was the fate of him. Who knows? But let me know what you guys think in the comments. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.